So you might have seen in the last weekly roundup video that I did at the end of April that we're not doing the weekly roundup videos anymore. Instead, we're going to be doing a monthly podcast, which is really exciting. And as you can see, I'm not on my own. I didn't want to do it on my own, so I brought a friend, and this is Curtis. So Curtis, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi everyone, my name's Curtis. A little fun fact about me, I love Doctor Who. My favourite Doctor is David Tennant, and just to give a bit of background into me, I have autism, ADHD, mental health, and I struggle with change.
Thank you. And for those of you who may not know, I am Ashleigh Jones. I'm the Citizens Network Connector at Midland Mencap, and I have cerebral palsy and I have autism as well. So I think this monthly podcast is going to be great because we actually can give you richer content in a more structured format. So we've had an idea and we've come up with some segments that we want to provide in these monthly podcasts, which could include things like general news around people with disabilities and long-term health conditions. We also want to maybe include things such as sport, leisure and entertainment. And then we also want to make sure that you're included. So if you have any questions that you want to put forward to myself and Curtis, and also some guest speakers, so that we can provide our thoughts, opinions, and maybe some advice, feel free to comment in or email us, and we can maybe include them in the monthly podcasts. So I think what we'll do is start with some monthly news. So we've had a look on BBC News, haven't we, Curtis?
We have, yes.
What was the main things that we'd seen with that?
We found a 16-year-old boy in Ireland called James, who has cerebral palsy, travelled around Ireland to see how accessible travel is for wheelchair users.
Now, I think that's actually quite interesting because, as you're probably aware, the Commonwealth Games is coming up this year and it's in Birmingham, and it's really affected transport, I think, in and around Birmingham, which has created quite a lot of accessibility issues, not just for people with disabilities or long-term health conditions, but for everyone in general. And actually, on that topic, I was just wondering, Curtis, because I've got experiences as well.
Yeah.
But what are your experiences using public transport? Because I know that that's your main method of transport, isn't it?
Yeah, I do find it hard on public transport sometimes. Sometimes I get my dad to drop me off places I don't know. But otherwise, I do plan my route. So I do what's called like a dummy run. So I'm comfortable, so I know where I'm going. Stuff like that. So
with all of these things that are happening in preparation for Commonwealth Games, with all of the, struggles with public transport, would that be quite stressful for you?
It would, yeah.
Okay. And so say if I could wave a magic wand and I could make things really accessible for you on public transport, what is one thing that you would suggest to be changed to make it more accessible for you? I
think that we should make a bus lane, obviously when they're building the Commonwealth Games at the moment, I think there should build like a bus lane for buses, so it'd be easy for buses and cars to go through. So instead of waiting and everything, so it'd be easier for people to go through.
Okay. And in terms with the accessibility bit, with you getting on and off buses, I don't know whether your balance is affected. Is there anything that could be improved with that?
My balance is affected. I do often trip and everything. So that's why I do walk quite slowly sometimes, but I do have to hold on to things sometimes, like when I do get off the bus and everything. But I've just learned how to adapt to that.
Okay, that's fine. And I think this sort of brings us on to the next sort of segment, really, having autism. And I know that you've just said, and likewise with myself, struggling with change and everything, with sport, leisure and entertainment. Now, when we were planning and preparing for this, I was so happy that you'd watched this series.
Yeah.
And it's a Netflix series. It's called Atypical. And just to give people an overview, Atypical is based around this young gentleman called Sam, and he has autism. Now, interestingly, and we were talking about this earlier, I Googled him because I was absolutely obsessed with the series, and the actor actually doesn't have autism. But this series is basically following Sam's journey in the preparation from going from high school to college and navigating his journey with that change, which is a massive change, as I'm sure people are aware, and also starting his first romantic relationship. And the other thing that I think was really good was the fact that it also highlighted the people around him, like his friends, like his family, and how the symptoms of his autism had affected them as well, which I think is really important, don't you?
I do, yes, 100%. Because I think it's hard for someone to understand someone with autism, because if they haven't got it themselves, so they probably have to adapt to their way of thinking and their way of living.
Definitely. And also from the point of view of having that, awareness of how much parents, carers, family, friends and other support have to go through as well to be able to find coping strategies for that person living with autism as well, isn't it?
I totally agree.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So just on, I think we need to rate this really, in terms of recommending it to our listeners, so that it's something that they could potentially watch. So what would you rate it out of a star from 1 to 5?
5. Guys, got to be 5 because of the way Sam portrayed the actor having autism. It was brilliant.
It was really good. Now, see, I'd have to rate it probably about 3.5 to 4. But the only reason for that, right, is because I think there was only 4 or 5 series, which just wasn't enough for me. So that's why I'd mark it down, because there's not enough series and they're not doing any more, which is... it's devastating, really.
Yeah, it is.
So, if you haven't already, guys, I'd really think about watching that.
Definitely.
It's an easy watch. Yeah. It's light-hearted, as well as being educational without being too deep as well. So, as I say, it's a nice, easy watch, and it's something that you can binge through as well, which is always, always good.
Yep.
So, the last segment, as I said, we really want your input, really, with questions so that we can maybe give our thoughts and opinions and maybe some advice if we can. Obviously, not all the time our advice is worthwhile listening to, because it's all going to be based around our own personal experience. So it might not be relevant to you, but we can try and help as much as possible. Now, we have actually got a question to kick us off with this new monthly podcast. And that is from someone, it was a gentleman, and he'd said, I want to take part in an activity that is local to my area, but it's not fully accessible for my specific needs. What do I do? So what advice would you give, Curtis, based on your personal experiences? Have you got an experience maybe with that?
I have, yes. If it's not accessible, you can talk to the leader to see if what they can do to change. Or if you don't want to go down that route, you could ask if you're into photography to maybe take some photos of the event to promote it.
Yeah, so that you're still involved in somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree with that. I think based on my experience, something that does jump out to me is I'm quite into going to the gym. I like going to fitness classes and everything. But as you can imagine, fitness classes aren't always accessible because you need 2 hands. And unfortunately, my one hand, as you probably can see, does not work very well. So on that particular occasion, with one of those classes that I really wanted to do, I'd actually gone and spoken to the fitness instructor a few days before about the class that I wanted to take part in. I'd spoken to her about my disability, what issues I had and things that I'd struggle with. So she sat down with me and went through the plan that she was going to use for all of the exercises within that class. And we devised some exercises specifically for me that were very similar to the ones that she was doing in the class for everyone else, whilst just being more accessible for myself so that I could really take part in that class. I could feel included without feeling silly with things being too different, which I thought was really effective. So my advice would be go and speak to the person, because it's not until you speak to them, they're not going to know how to make things more accessible for you. And you need to work with that person to make sure it is fully accessible for you. So as I say, I think, and as you've just said, speak to the person, because that's the only way that it is going to be made more accessible. So well, I think that's gone really well, don't you, Curtis?
I do. I really do,
Yeah, so that's rounded up our very first monthly podcast. And as I say, if you have any questions that you want to put forward for us to include in our next podcast, please either drop us a comment on social media or you can email us as well. So see you next time.
Bye.